Kravitz. If you have not followed his Triple H horse racing podcast, you're missing out. It's one of the best podcasts in the country.
Good evening and welcome to episode 279 of the HHH Racing Podcast. I'm your proud host, Howard Kravitz. Thank you very much for joining us tonight as we have a very special show previewing the Del Mar Pick 5 this Saturday, the late Pick 5 with graded stakes. It's a fantastic sequence and card. Plus, the one and only, the track announcer at Saratoga Racecourse, Mr. Frank Mirahmadi, will be joining us live with your questions, and he'll be talking about many things. We're really excited to have Frank on the show. That'll be after we handicap Del Mar. Please make sure you subscribe on the bottom right-hand side of the screen. Hit that notification bell, and I mean smash that like button. You can follow me on Twitter on my name tag at HKravitz, and of course, scrolling on the bottom of the screen is my email, hkravitzhorse@gmail.com. You can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Anchor. Look below the video player for our regular Power Picks, which is on our fantastic website. I'm not sure we've even talked about our website enough. We talk a lot about our YouTube channel, of course, that a lot of you are watching right now. But our website is fantastic. Pete Visco does a great job with it. Please check it out. There's pages of information, everything you'd want to know about the podcast and many other things. So please go to our website as well, hhhracingpodcast.com. You can see it below on the banner right now is our Patreon website for our Power Picks. And we also have Saratoga only Power Picks. If you want this weekend's Power Picks, you do need to subscribe in the next 5 hours as we're filming this, 4 hours by midnight Eastern time. So if you want this weekend's only, weekend number 3 Power Picks, go to our website, hhhracingpodcast.com. There's a banner for the website as well. So please go ahead and check that out. Also, one other thing, I did email everyone who is a Power Pick subscriber. As many of you know, or you should know by now, I am traveling to Saratoga Springs, New York. Very excited. My flight leaves in the morning on Saturday. So due to my travel schedule, things I have to do. Tonight, Thursday, I will be emailing out the Friday Saratoga Power Pick. So if you receive Saratoga Power Pick tip sheet, you will receive Friday's card tonight, Thursday night through email. And then the Saturday and Sunday tip sheets you will receive Friday night or tomorrow night. Those are going to be written by Pete and Paul, and we will email those out to you Friday night. Just want to give you a heads up on that. If you are a regular Power Pick subscriber, I will be emailing that out also probably tomorrow morning, Friday morning, for the Saturday regular Power Pick. So anyway, check your email. Things are going to be changing. Next week, our shows might look a little different. We're going to have different new technology because we're going to be in Saratoga, the whole crew. So again, look for our YouTube channel, look for emails. Things are going to be changing. We are extremely excited to be at Saratoga next week to enjoy the races and all the festivities at the spa. All right, I think that takes care of everything. Let me bring on my fantastic co-host first from the Saratoga Special and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and someone who will be in Saratoga, I believe, starting Tuesday, Mr. Paul Halloran, and fresh off the beach, no, not the Caribbean, but almost as beautiful, the Jersey Shore, back from his vacay, Mr. Pete Visco. Guys, how are we doing tonight?
What's up, fellas? Good to see you guys again. It's been forever.
Pete, good to see you, man. Show wasn't the same. I had to deal with only Paul, but we managed somehow.
I mean, that's rough, but luckily you get him at night. Yeah, you get him at night, so he's a little tired and slow, so it's all right.
That's right. We got a lot of people in the chat. Let's see. We have so many people here. I mean, let's see. We got Katie. Katie is here. Hello, Katie. We got David Duncan, better known as Racing Downwind. Hello, let's do this. Vale Place. This is a smashing intro. Love Howard's face from the Derby. I've told the story. I'm not going to get into it, Vale, but that was an actual reaction. Like, I didn't make that up. I was literally watching the Derby in real time, and that was a WTF moment, guys, obviously. We've got Sylvain, bonsoir. What's up, Sylvain? How are you? Sylvain, can you take care of some of those forest fires in Canada? Because we had some bad air quality here in Chicago this week again. Let's see here. We got Tom Espinoza is here. The whole gang is here. Guys, before we get into Del Mar and then into Frank Mirahmadi's life, which we're really excited to have Frank Mirahmadi on, let's quickly talk about the Haskell. Go Rocket Ride, Richard Mandella, 12-1. I know all of us were sort of against Arabian Night in general for Baffert, but I know, Paul, you and I had a little bit of trouble finding Go Rocket Ride, although you used them a little bit. I think, Pete, you used them. I was completely against them, and I was completely wrong. Pete?
Go ahead, Paul. You could go first. You look like you had something to say.
I was I found him. I just didn't capitalize on him. I mean, he was not my top choice in the race, but I would say solidly that if Arabian Night did not win, my two were the three, the Brad Cox horse, who did not run well, and Go Rocket Ride. He was a solid B for me. I had a pretty good double starting with Catnip, who got beat in the leg before.
You got catnipped.
I got more than nipped. Yeah, that would have been a good one because he was not the favorite in the race, I don't think. And then I started a pretty good pick 3 with Go Rocket Ride singled, and of course I couldn't get the other 2 legs home. So it was shocking to no one. I did not capitalize on him. So again, I didn't love him, but I thought he was a real viable alternative.
Paul, I know you mentioned to me off air that you're a little, well, disappointed is not exactly the words you used, but I won't. I'll let you speak for yourself. The fact that Go Rocket Ride is not going to the Travers, I get it. He's going back west, then he'd come east. He'd have to go back home, then go back east again. He's choosing the Pacific Classic. I guess we're disappointed as Saratoga fans, right? He's not going to Travers.
Well, no, we're disappointed as racing fans, Howard, because you get to be a 3-year-old once, and you can run in the Derby once, the Preakness once, the Belmont once, the Jerkins once, to some degree, the Test once, and the Travers once. And look, everyone, we went through this before with Flightline. Everyone's got to do what's best for their own horse. Mandella's a Hall of Famer. I like Mandella. I just think, though, if you have any type of inkling for the good of the game and the history of the game, you send him to the Travers, or if you want to win the 3-year-old division, because it is wide open. If he wins the Travers, he's the 3-year-old champ, barring a 3-year-old winning the Classic.
Yeah, I was thinking, it's funny, Paul, you say that. I was thinking of that earlier today in preparation for the show. And to me, he's out from 3-year-old champion unless he wins. Unless somebody weird wins the Travers, and somebody doesn't win the Travers and the Dandy, and he wins the Classic.
Well, if he wins the
Pacific, right, that he'd have to do all that for me. Otherwise, he's out. I wouldn't even consider. You can't not win a Triple Crown race or the Travers and win 3-year-old of the year in my book.
Yeah. Now, if he wins the Pacific Classic in the Breeders' Cup Classic, which I think is unlikely.
Yeah. Then yes.
Then he's in the conversation. But I don't know. I get it. But, he's talking about the ship. Well, the Travers is in a month. So I'm pretty sure you could go right from New Jersey. I think they would have given him a stall up at Saratoga.
Mean, it is. Yeah. Listen, I'm not going to question Mandella. I get it. It's a little disappointing. Maybe they obviously don't care about 3-year-old champion. They just want to do what's best for the horse in the short term. And that's where they're deciding. By the way, guys, I need to mention something real quick. Some people might be wondering, I love TVG. Obviously, they've been great to us, but why am I wearing the hat specifically tonight? I got a little shout out, guys, and a little quick info. Want to shout out to Nick. Nick knows who he is. He's a senior VIP account manager who has hooked me up. He's taking care of me to some extent. I am now officially a key account holder with TVG, and I'm going to be using TVG exclusively now as my ADW. And so thanks to Nick out there, and highly recommend everyone check out or Naira Bets if you're Paul, but okay. Anyway, they're not officially a sponsor, but Nick's been great to me, so I just want to give a shout out to Nick. And
we love TVG. We love TVG.
We love TVG.
Tell him to
Nick
make
Paul's
a pick.
Just kidding, by the way.
Tell him to make a pick 5. Now that you're in, tell them to make a pick 5 ticket maker like DRF has, so we don't have to actually load the tickets into TVG.
Matt Miller says Nick is the absolute best. I could tell you, Pete, I don't want to give details. I had face-to-face conversation with Nick about getting Ticketmaker. The problem is the DRF product, and so they're gonna have to come up with some other methodology. But they're working on it. There's some Matt Miller. And he said we are working on it. So Matt is very much.
Well, now that I
the time. He's got the time.
Now that I know Matt's doing it, then I have a little bit more faith.
I understand.
No offense. No offense.
I totally get it. Anyway, so the 3-year-old division is interesting. Any quick thoughts?
Howard, I thought Mage ran much better than I expected. I think he ran very well.
I actually have a question for you guys. I didn't get to talk to Haskell with you guys. Is there any thought though that Mage? So the Derby is the outlier, and Mage just is excellent. He's very good, but he might hang a little bit. He's hung in 3 of the races. The only one he didn't hang was the Derby with that crazy pace, and the Derby is almost like a cross-off. But not that he hung against Forte, but he got beat pretty easy, making the lead. He hung in whatever race was the prior to. He didn't
hang in the Florida Derby, in my opinion. But that's how we don't
want to
rehash that.
Not necessarily hang, but he still did. He got beat bad. I thought he got beat easy by Forte in the Florida Derby. You know that. We had that discussion.
Right, we talked about it. Yeah.
He ran his race this week, and Go Rocket Ride, he was on his hip, and he couldn't go by. I'm just asking a question. I'm not saying that's what I think. I'm just asking the question.
I'll answer real quick. Paul, you answer, then we got to move on to the show. I think his burst is shorter than the connections would like. I don't think in other words, he has that more like quarter-mile burst, Pete, like he did in the Florida Derby and some other places where he can get himself into the game. I know the Derby, I guess you could argue, wasn't that, but he's shown me the ability to really make up ground on the turn because he's so damn athletic. But he doesn't have that like long, like 1/8 of a mile run. And so maybe
that's what I'm talking about.
Maybe they just have to time out that burst better. Paul, that's my only real thought on that.
Yeah, I just think coming off the layoff, and we talked about it last week on the show, Pete. They basically decided on Tuesday to run on Saturday in a grade 1. Sure. So my expectations, they were a little too low because I actually did play Go Rocket Ride on top in some exactas and did not have Mage. So the more we talk about that race, the more idiotic I sound. But I do think that was a pretty good race to move forward to off of, Pete. And I got a hunch he's going to like Saratoga.
Yeah.
And I thought all along that if it was a tie in Castellano's mind, he may go with Mage. There's a connection there, with his countryman Gustavo Delgado. I think it's a tough choice. But I think after Mage running that race, I'm gonna give a slight edge to Castellano picking him. But we'll see, Pete.
Just curious.
I think Howard's on target.
Yeah.
Because the Derby is not a race won with a big, with a huge burst, certainly down the stretch. But he made his burst when he needed to, and Go Rocket Ride got the trip. He got the rail trip, and Mike Smith had a good ride. I thought Mage ran a lot better than I thought he was going to be honest with you.
He'll be a factor. Noah Maher. Excuse me, Noah. I got to make sure I get that right. Noah Maher does a great job on Ben Boozen subbing in. Said, glad these guys are fine. What I'm about to finally showing Del Mar some love. We love Del Mar. But we've got Saratoga covered also like a glove on our morning shows and Bet and Booze and whatever. But
hey, Noah,
the Del Mar card.
Noah, I like Del Mar better than Saratoga. Don't tell anybody.
What? Well, let me just say this, Noah and Pete, and we're going to get on Del Mar right now. As much as I love Del Mar and Saratoga, obviously Paul's got mad love for Saratoga. Pete, I got to say, so far, and it's still only the second weekend of the Del Mar season, Del Mar's cards have been bigger fields. There have been less scratches. The racing has just simply been better. And I don't mean to throw shade at Naira or Saratoga because Saratoga is awesome. Del Mar, and this pick 5 is another example, is completely off the charts good right now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't think we'll have to go too far on that. I sort of agree. But I agree with Paul a little bit too, where, guys have to run their race, they run their horses in some of these races too. Let's not just put it all on the on the Nairas and whoever else on sort of those groups. Let's put it on the trainers have to run in the races. The owners have to run in the races. You don't be scared of running against these top-notch horses. Run against them and let's fill some of these, especially the stakes race. It's disappointing when the stakes races have tiny fields, and no matter how good that the fields are, it's just not as exciting, and we want to see as much competition as possible.
Ralph, I do see your comment. We'll ask Frank to do at least one impression. I don't want to put him on the spot too much. Guys, we're not going to talk about, if you're interested in Saratoga late pick 5 Saturday, which is a great sequence also, watch Saratoga today, Saturday morning with Pete and Paul. They'll be covering the late pick 5. The fields are
Pete and Kyle.
Oh, is it? Oh, it's Pete and Kyle?
Yeah.
Oh, it's Pete and Kyle.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I think I'm on. I think I'm on. I don't think I'm. Am I on?
No, you're not.
No, I'm on tomorrow.
You're on tomorrow with me. My bad. Sorry, Paul. But join Pete and Kyle Saturday. Small fields, but in the stake races. But wow, are they loaded fields? So it's going to be exciting, guys. Let's go on to the pick 5 at Del Mar on Saturday right now. As I go ahead and show our picks on the bottom of the screen, it starts in race 7. It's approximately 8:09. Eastern Standard Time on Saturday. Again, the late pick 5, Saturday, Del Mar, race 7. It starts with the main claimer, 55,000 up to 62.5, mile 16th on the turf. The rails are out 12 feet, might help the speed a little bit. It's a very big field. This has been, we've seen this many times already at Del Mar at these nice size fields. Moorline favorite is the number 9. Adelaide, I believe, for D'Amato and Antonio Fresu. Paul, let's go to you first. You're going with the number 1, the Flying Pharaoh, 12-1 Moorline, Yachtin and Herrera.
Yeah, and I didn't have the morning lines, but not that it matters. This horse dropped. Well, first of all, he's got all those East Coast races, so you know how I feel about turf horses going west.
Yes,
Last time was at least a decent, if not good effort. There was some trouble, as indicated. He did take money. I think he can improve off that race. Obviously, the Pharaohs on turf are very good. I didn't think this.
Paul, Pete, did you get the over/under on the misgender there?
Did I say
on the first horse of the sequence? No, I would have had the over. I would have given him a little more credit than that.
Nice glass. Paul. Go ahead.
I don't think this is a killer field. Not that a maiden claiming race should be. And now that I've seen the odds, I'm kind of intrigued a little bit. So, I don't love her, but I think she's got more than a puncher's chance, and you'll get paid if you're right.
I've got her third. I do not like 5-year-olds who have not broken their maiden. That is a big negative for me, but I figured she needed one on the West Coast and maybe she could improve. I don't think she's impossible. I like the 12-1 also. Pete, you're going with the 4, who Paul has second. I have the 4 absolutely nowhere. Warren's Paradise. This is a Calbred who's, I suppose you could say dropping down, but I think a maiden special state bred is pretty equivalent to a maiden claiming 62.5. If not, maybe even more difficult. I don't know. That's for another day. Coming off a layoff for JJ, who's pretty damn good in the saddle, and Craig Lewis.
Yeah, so I did not like this race at all. So I'm just going to lead in with that. So I did not have a ton of confidence in my pick. So I landed on Warren's Paradise. The things that scared me, the notes that I had, which exactly what you said, were facing sort of open company for the first time, facing older for the first time, 3-year-old against some older. Speed figures are low. So there's basically a lot of knocks against this horse. The thing I did like, though, is I like that she was, she ran nice races as a 2-year-old. They weren't great, but she passed horses. She was able to close a little bit into some quick paces. She took some money once they put her on the turf. She improved on the turf. So my thought is, if there's progression from 2 to 3, the horses in this race that she's trying to catch aren't that far ahead of her. So if she does progress and she's just comes back a little better than she was, we're adding Lasix too. maybe she could step up. And I was hoping to get, when I handicapped this, I was hoping to get a little bit, maybe more of a price, but I don't mind, say 5-1. And Craig Lewis, he's pretty good with the maiden special weight to maiden claim drop. But like you said, it's not, it's a little bit maybe more lateral than a drop, but still, it's just a horse in a race where I didn't like a lot of horses. I thought maybe this one has some upside, and we haven't seen her best yet. And what she's done has been, pretty good, solid.
Does the top bother you at all, Paul? These are the layoff stats for Craig Lewis. 6+ months, 1 for 17.
It did, yes, it did, and I had that one noted as well. But again, in a race where I could pick a bunch of stats that go against a lot of these horses, and their form goes against a lot of these horses, so it was basically just picking. I was hoping for upside, and if we get it, great. But it's a spread race to me, in all honesty.
You guys are completely ignoring exclusive Joni. Maybe I'm way off base here. I don't like the 4-1 morning line. I agree with you, Pete. This is like wide open. I would never take too low a price. Exclusive Joni's got numbers in maiden 50 claimers at Gulfstream that absolutely fit, if not better than most. Was just claimed for Hess. Hess and DeSomo are a good combination. I see no reason why this horse can't take a step forward. I don't care too much about a turf horse working on dirt, but 59-3 is pretty damn good. I don't know. She's a fresh face. I thought she was interesting. I thought she could take a step forward. Adelaide, I believe.
By the way, real quick, I had the 6 as sort of an A. Just was maybe the 4th horse. So when we get to our tickets, I actually have the 6. I did have Hess 1 for 50 first after the claim in California. Ooh. So that scared me a bit. That was one where
about to be 2 for 51.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. Again, in a race like this, I could probably find a bunch of stats against some rough stats, but that one where I was like, if I'm nitpicking between my top 4 and who's going to make my top 3, that was actually the one that sort of pushed this horse to the 4th spot. But that was it.
Paul, quick thoughts on the 9, then we'll move on. It's a drop down for D'Amato. Coming off a layoff, that's never a concern with me. I mean, she's just logical. You could argue you don't like the drop down, but Del Mar's like Saratoga, right? These guys are looking to win races. To me, drop downs mean less at Saratoga and Del Mar than they would other places. And when I say less, I mean in a negative way, less.
Yeah, I'm coming out of a good race. Horses coming out of that maiden special from last September at Del Mar. 2 winners and 4 thirds. So 6 horses ran well out of that. D'Amato is 14% on this drop, but only 1 for 15 at Del Mar. And back to your 4, Pete, Craig Lewis, not only is he 28% on this drop, 43% at Del Mar. So if you want to mitigate that 180 number, and who knows? So now you got one number. And I will say, Howard, you referenced it. Hernandez is simply as good as any jockey on the West Coast right now, period. End of tweet. He is really riding extremely well.
By the way, that 9, sorry, Paul, I was just going to say that 9 is 7-2 favorite. We said, right? Adelaide is the favorite. Hasn't been less than basically 20-1 in the last 5 starts. So that always freaks you out a little bit too, where this one took no money now. But again, I have it.
D'Amato, and they're going to bet D'Amato is the Chad Brown of the West Coast when it comes to the way they bet turf races.
Yep, for sure.
Guys, let's move on to one of the 2 stake races on the card. And both these stake races are, I thought, fantastic.
Awesome.
Big fields, competitive. One thing that came to mind, I don't know how many of these horses are going to be threats in the Breeders' Cup coming up in November, but with the assumption that everyone watching and listening to the show will be betting the Breeders' Cup, you got to pay attention because there are some sort of home field advantages here for these West Coast horses, as the Breeders' Cup this year is at Santa Anita. And I think some of these horses could be factors, and I think you have to really pay attention to these big stake races out on the West Coast, especially this year if you're interested in the Breeders' Cup. You see our scroll on the bottom of the screen right now, and I'll go ahead and bring up. This is the San Diego. It's a local prep for the Pacific Classic. It's a grade 2 for older males. They're going 1 mile and a 16th on the dirt. It's a nice field. I see Paroli's actually scratched already, which I did not know. So Paroli is out. It's a field of 9, and there's a pretty big morning line favorite here, the number 6, Defunded for Baffert, and the aforementioned Juan Hernandez. The Defunded is just he's classy. He's very consistent. But Paul, you and I are going to go against the grain a little bit here. Pete doesn't have our horse on top anywhere at all. We're going to go with Slow Down Andy, Paul, for O'Neill and Gutierrez, 5-1, I believe. Second choice on the morning line. Paul, I'll let you go first. What do you like about this really talented Calbred?
Well, he dances a lot of dances. O'Neill was not afraid to ship him to the Met Mile, in which he ran into some pretty good horses, as we saw. But the fact that he had confidence to ship him across the country, that was only his first start of the year. Right? You got to think he's going to I'm thinking he's certainly going to move forward off of that race. Second start off the layoff. I like, in this configuration, I like the one. I think Gutierrez, this horse is usually forward. There's no reason why to think he won't be forward. And I think he might be forward to the point of like on or near the lead forward. We'll talk, the 10 obviously has got sprinter's speed, so that's a factor. And I'm sure we'll talk about Defunded. Defunded might be just a tad less sharp with his speed going 1 mile and a 16th than he is 1 mile and an 1/8, mile and a quarter. So I think the one certainly could sit off that sprinter on the outside and get a good trip. And looks like a decent price. What did I see, 5-1, Howard, when you put the odds up?
Slow Down Andy has done absolutely nothing wrong in his last 3 starts, and the last 2 starts he's lost to some horse. What's the name? Cody. Cody's Wish, who is the 3rd ranked best horse in the world right now, Paul, or some kind of ridiculous number.
First in the U.S. right now. So
I think Slow Down Andy's going to have a great trip off of Brickyard Ride. I think Gutierrez is going to break. Look to his right, see what Defunded does. Brickyard Ride's going to have the lead. I'm not worried about that horse going 1 mile and 16th. Frankly, I think Slow Down Andy's going to go by him whenever he pleases. I'm much more worried about Defunded, obviously, but I think he's got some options. I don't want to see Gutierrez send crazy hard. I don't think he needs to do that. And I do agree with you, Paul, that I think Defunded's better 1 mile and 1/8, maybe longer. He's a little more grindy. This distance is perfect for Slow Down Andy. I think he's fascinating. Pete, I got to ask you real quick before we get to your pick. What is it you didn't like about Slow Down Andy?
One little stat, which is actually a funny one. Graded stakes at Del Mar, Doug O'Neill, 2 for 68, but one of those 2 is actually Slow Down Andy. So that sort of, that means you could sort of debunk it if you want to. It's not that I didn't like it. I like this horse. I think Defunded just might be better. And if I'm just going to take Defunded, then I don't necessarily need to take both of them is sort of my thought.
With you, Pete.
Yeah. And I think the pace, I agree with you guys on the trip. I think Slow Down Andy will get the trip. I actually like Slow Down Andy to hit the board, but it wasn't a win contender. Not a win contender, just not a top line win contender for me.
8-5. I guess that's fair. I was going to say 8-5 is low, Pete, but that's being a bit disrespectful. This horse is very good. I don't know what it is about Saturday. I just don't think he has to win. I think he's gonna be overbet. I don't
think he has to win, but I think if you're picking him, you sort of have to single him and then maybe back up. But just from a sort of a value standpoint, which is what I wound up doing because I went deeper in the other legs if you're talking about horizontals. Okay. But I like that Defunded doesn't need the lead. I like if he has to run the race 2 back. Now I know this is a little bit better competition, but I think he doesn't need to be on the lead. So he doesn't have to get into the Slow Down Andy and Brickyard Ride sort of speed duel that I'm hoping for.
If Defunded's 8-5, I have a feeling a Matt Miller win wager will be flying in from his little hands there on his phone. So I don't think we're getting 8-5.
I don't think you're getting 8-5. Yeah.
What do we get? Even money odds on, Pete?
I would assume. Yeah, I would say probably. I would have guessed 4-5 even money.
But it'd be fair to say that Baffert. I mean, his horses are not short in general, but it's fair to say that this is a prep for him for the Pacific Classic. I mean, he can't be 100% cranked up for this race.
No, probably not. No, I also don't think, though, this isn't the greatest field in the world either. So I think he's better than the horses in this race. I think there's some that could step up and move forward. But I think just based on what we've seen so far, I think he's sort of the best by a little bit of a margin.
Matt said a large hop at you. So, you guys have American Admiral in the mix. I've got Senior Buscador in the mix. I actually thought there was a decent amount of speed. Paul, real quick on American Admiral. Maybe this one is improving for Yachtine. Got 98 buyer last time, although that was a 4-horse field, by the way. Just let everyone know.
Yeah, this is strictly, looking at the fact he's been 9 times out of 18, second and third. So, as I was picking my top 3, he was strictly a third. I in my mind, it's 1-6 or 6-1, and this is what people need to understand about wagering. Matt Miller, whose opinion we respect as much as anyone, will say even money to 8-5 absolutely loves the 6. You and I, Howard, who are not quite at his level, but we're aspiring to get there. The thing is, the one's going to be 5-1. So, you both can be good bets. Now only one can win, but the one at 5-1 can be a good bet because if you're right, you're going to get paid. And if you love the 6 that much, the 6 at 1-1 could be a good bet because you might think he should be 1-5. So it's just how you approach it.
I would be very interested in a Dutch exacta 1-6-6-1 personally for me. I'll speak for myself. Senior Buscador could round out the try. I'm not going to talk about him too much. He's got some back numbers that are very good. And if the pace is going to be fair, I don't think it's going to be contested because I think Brickyard Ride is that quick early, but it will be a fast pace. I think we're pretty, convinced of that. So I think your Royal Ships and your Senior Buscadors could round out your tries. Any other quick thoughts, guys, before we move on?
I wanted to like Royal Ship. At first, that's where I thought I was going, and then I just couldn't. I just couldn't get there in the end. The form just hasn't been as good lately, and I just couldn't see why he would reverse the race 2 back against a funded. But if you go back to last year and some of the races that prior to the loss to Flightline, those races fit. Those races can win this. I just don't know if he has that in his bag anymore. It doesn't seem like he does.
He is getting blinkers off, and it's Smith and Mandela. That combination worked pretty well in the Jersey Shore. Yeah. So I wouldn't discount those guys, but he's already 7, Pete. That's
the thing. If he was, 7 scares you because it may just be, hey, we all get a little old and move a little slower than we used to.
No doubt about that. Let's move on to race 9, guys. Race 9 on the bottom of the screen, you see our picks. Race 9 is a real nice allowance optional 40 claimer. They're going on the turf 1 mile. These are for the girls. You hear that, Paul? These are for the girls. Okay, for the girls.
I hear ya.
Julian Mares. Okay. It is a field of 12. There are also 2 eligibles who I would doubt would get in. Maybe one of them would get in. Moreline favorite here is the number 4, Impact Warrior, for D'Amato and DeSormo. Pete, let's go to you first. Now, I got to bring us on screen here, Pete. When I looked at this race, I'm not an all ball kind of guy. I thought this race was practically impossible. Like
nothing.
Complete cluster, practically an all ball. And then I made my decision, right, with my picks. And then you sent your picks in, and I'm like, what? I had almost I don't know how we both come up with 9-12 in this race because I thought this race was absolutely ridiculous. In fact, I'm just looking at the bottom of the screen. Both of our top 3s, Pete. Paul has none of our top 3s in his top 3, but that makes complete sense because I rarely say this on this show. I have no freaking idea who's going to win this race. I thought this race was absolutely impossible. So we're going to get high. I mean, we're going to go with ultimate high, Pete.
I mean, I'm with you. And the worst part is when you have a race like that and you land on a 3-1 shot anyway, and you're like, this is the one where you maybe should take a shot. With the 9, I mean, the ultimate high, she runs her race all the time, 6 for 8 at the distance, but she doesn't like to win. And that's what scares you. So you're like, am I picking a horse on top at 3-1 that just runs a good race almost every time, but just can't hit the wire? And that's what scares you. So to me, it's, again, this is sort of I'd like to take a shot against, but I think the 9 is probably the best horse. So it's a weird one where you're it's not a favorite. She's not the favorite, but she's someone who I think is vulnerable to low price, but I still think is probably the best horse in the race. So it makes it tough, but that's why I went with a couple long shots, I think, with this horse, because I think this is one where you could just get a price, because I don't trust any of them on top.
I would never bet. I mean, I'm using Ultimate Highs in A. I would never put a win bet on this.
Oh God,
no.
God,
than
no.
5-1 in this race, I would say. We're going with the 12 Shocking Gray. I'm a little bit shocked to see 12-1, Pete. I like that. Not the easiest post for sure, but I'm a big fan of Mullins and Barrios. This race is wide open. If she can find a way to tuck in early, why not?
Yeah, that was sort of my thought, and I also she runs better at a mile. So if you look at her races, her races at a mile have all been really solid. And even that last one, there was a couple next out winners were behind her in that last race. She pops a nice 81 buyer, gets a little bit of time off again. I just think this one is maybe at her optimal distance in a race where I don't think there's a ton in terms of high quality that you have to really be concerned about. I like the lifetime buyer top, so that means at least we have a horse, Howard, that's improving and has sort of improved at the mile distance, has improved every race. So if we can get a little bit more improvement at 12-1, I think she's sort of up there with on the top line, and getting double-digit price on that is fantastic to me.
I agree. I just think it's completely wide open. There's many ways you can go. Paul's going to go with the number 3 Rebel Girl at 8-1 for Leonard Powell. And there's our guy, Juan Hernandez, again. Looks a little bit slow, but maybe she's an improving 4-year-old, and she gets a real nice cozy post, Paul, while the other ones that we mentioned do not.
Yeah, Howard, I think this is a good price. Powell's off to a great start, as you could see in the stats, 42%.
Yeah, yes.
That race that Rebel Girl comes out of, there have been 3 horses to win and 3 horses to run second. And Anisette, I thought, ran huge in her win.
A best bet power pick tip sheet play, by the way. She was unbelievable.
Was she unbelievable, Howard? She was unbelievable.
She was really good.
And, this horse is 2 1/4 lengths off of her. I hear what you guys say. I got the 9 in my mix, but didn't want any part of her on top with the 1 for 15. This is a type of race where you have to hope to be right, and if you're right, you get paid. If you go, this is the race where if you go 6 deep and get the favorite, you want to just throw out the ticket and move on to the next day. But there's certainly potential in this. This is a very good betting race.
I'm not poo-pooing Paul's pick at all. I just want to, for factual purposes, I just want to say that Ultimate High did beat Rebel Girl in their last race, but not by much. So I just do want to throw that out there as a fact. Pleasant Wave is a horse I looked at dropping down from grade stakes, 10-1 morning line. It's got the rail. Paul, again, why not? Why not?
Right. Now, again, horses coming out of that race last time are 0 for 6, but 4 of them were in stakes races. So this horse is running very good company. I agree with you, Howard, that the rail at this mile distance on the Del Mar turf is good. Herrera's off to a rough start, as is Pepodromo. Yeah, I think I said that right.
Pepodromo.
But
close enough.
This would be one of those horses, Howard, you could use, the famous reverse tri-key and play second and third. I think this horse has a real good chance to at least be on the board, and I'm going to have him right in the mix in my pick 5.
I mean, Pete, this is just use as many as you can, right? I mean,
yeah, and I like all really the horses that I know we differed, but I liked all the horses that Paul has as well, and they were all in competition for sort of the top 3 and sort of the A line, and I would have added all of them in my caveman ticket if I could have. If I could have gone overboard, this is probably the race where I would have added a few more horses for sure.
I've got like 4 A's, 5 B's, and like 3 C's, like completely ridiculous. I mean, so you got to spread on that race. All right, let's go to race 10. I think this is the race of the day. I can make the argument the race of the day throughout the entire country. I'm going to be at Saratoga. So that's something that's quite a statement to say. But this Bing Crosby guy, the Bing Crosby gentleman, grade 1, is just an unbelievable race here. It's one of the better sprinting races on the West Coast. Matter of fact, it's one of the best sprint races usually in the country every year. And boy, did the West Coast horses show out, guys. I believe, is this a win in your end? I didn't check. I believe it is. Do you guys know for a fact? Somebody in the chat. I believe it is. If someone can tell us in the chat, let us know. I think it is, though. But I could be wrong.
Is it this or the Pat O'Brien that's a win you're in for the sprint, or both?
I thought the Pat O'Brien was for the mile and the Bing Crosby was for the six.
That could be. Yeah, the O'Briens.
Anyway, it's 6 furlongs for the older boys. It's a huge field of 12 here. And the morning line favorite is the number 11, Dr. Scheibel, for Glatt and Juan Hernandez. Juan Hernandez could have a big day. Guys, this is a fantastic race. You see our picks on the bottom of the screen. Paul, we're going to go to you first. We all have Dr. Scheibel in the mix. I have this horse also on top. He's very good. I suppose you can make the argument that the post position is not ideal, but I don't think is a need the lead type. And boy, is there a ton, at least I thought, a ton of early speed on paper, Paul. Stock and pounds for the win. Is that your thought?
Yeah, I like this horse a lot. And again, you can just throw out the last race. And he ran early last race. He just going a mile, that one-turn mile at Belmont in that field was just not for him. But horse for course, you could see his Del Mar stats. You could see his stats at this distance. I don't think the post doesn't bother me a whole lot, Howard. I agree with you. He certainly does not need to be on the lead, and you would think wouldn't be in this race, but should sit a really good trip out there. He does have Hernandez, so he's got the best rider. And I think there are horses in this race, Howard, that are going to take money that I don't like. So I like this, such as the Chosen Vron.
Okay.
I don't know what the morning line is, but I assume off all those ones, he's going to be bet.
Paul doesn't like Calbreds in the same way that I supposedly don't like Italians.
Well, I don't like. I like Calbreds when he's running with other Calbreds, but you could see what he did in the Pat O'Brien last year without running it with Calbreds.
I agree. I've gotten third, but I agree with you in general.
And again, I think he will be all of 4. I mean, it'll be 4-1 at the most, because we know that people love seeing those ones on the line. It is a winner you're in for the Breeders' Cup Sprint, by the way.
Yes, it is.
They can deal with Echo Zulu, who Asmussen is now talking about running in the sprint, which I love.
Against the
I think
really
NBC, yes, NBC got it right, Howard. They put that at the end of the day. It's going to be Echo Zulu and this horse and Elite Power. All will be well.
Steve, please don't do that, Steve.
Oh,
please just keep her against the girls.
Why?
Because she fits better there.
But you don't remember the days when there was no filly and mare sprint and how well the fillies held up?
Come on,
in
Paul.
The sprint?
Give me a little credit here. I do. I just don't think she might be better suited towards the 6 than the 7. I would agree with that.
112.
More qualified quality early speed with the boys. I don't know. We'll see. There's a long way to go, but
I like starting trouble, Pete. How'd I do, Pete?
I mean, you know me, Elite Power's going to run her down anyway, so I don't care if she runs there. Great, maybe she'll take some money. That would be fantastic.
Can we talk about the speed in this race, Pete? Now, Hoist the Gold actually is 118 early time for, but I don't think he's going to be sniffing the early lead personally, even though he was really fast last time in a race that I tried to beat him, and Paul was right, but that field last time was a grade 4 compared to this field. But anyway, Spirit of Makino, who we'll talk about in a second here, Pete, you've got on top, is very good and fast. Toto Fino is all speed. The Chosen Vron is not slow. Kid Corleone is fast. Anarchist is fast.
Peaceful Waters.
Sibelius is really fast.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a Peaceful Waters. If this horse is in, I mean, he's got to go. There's just a crap ton of early speed. And you're going to go with the horse that I'm assuming you feel can sit a little bit off it. Spirit Makina is very lightly raced, a 5-year-old with only 5 lifetime starts, but 4 for 5 and just as sharp as hell right now.
Yeah, I mean, and I had, because when he ran that last race, people thought, oh, this horse is going to be a player in the sprint, in the high level of the sprint division. So coming back, if this horse is as good as he's looked, and you can get him as not the favorite in this race, then I even like that even more. So if I can get this horse at 4-1, a horse who's just done absolutely nothing wrong. I do agree with you. Like, I don't mind the loss that came at a mile, just didn't hold. And that was, that was last year anyway. This year, I think he can sit off. He'll, from the 2-hole, he can work out a trip. I think there is a ton of speed. Like you said, the 12 has to go from the outside. So just from having that outside speed, I think that's going to heat it up just from the beginning. I think some of the speed's a little cheap as well, where I don't trust it to hold. So I want a horse I don't want a horse that's going to be mixed up in it. I want a horse that can sit right behind that. And I think this one is just ultra talented, and he could be the one to do it.
I love this way the horse is winning. I don't know about the class situation. This is a major, major class test, in my opinion, Pete. I mean, he has not been he's been facing Forbidden Kingdom, who, let's be honest, has been very disappointing. And some others that are in here, but not the top of the top. He's going to have to prove it to me. I'm against him, but he might stuff me in a locker. I mean, I totally get it. I just feel like he's got to prove it to me against this caliber field.
But I do like that. I'm sorry. I was just going to say, Howard, I do like that the horses that are in this, even though they're not at the top, he handled them pretty easily as well. So I like that, where he didn't struggle with sort of the lower level horses in this race. So that gives you a little bit of more hope that he can handle the class upswing.
Guys, I want to talk about this horse for a minute. This is one of my price plays the entire sequence. And I will say, I do have to look at the Clocker report before I make a final decision on Get Her Number. When you guys go look at Get Her Number real carefully, first of all, he's one of the few horses that actually close in this race. There are not very many horses that can close. He's got a 1:13 late time for him. But if you go back to November of 22 and July 30th of 22, look at those two races, guys. Both 6 furlongs, both at Del Mar, and he won one. Second to American Theorem, was really good then. In 108 and change, my first thought was Get Her Number wants more distance. I'm not so sure. If this horse is ready, guys, Smith is going to take him back, make a big run late at a big price. I need to look at the workout report. Like I said, they tried. Look, they were in the Pegasus. I mean, that's stupid. Forget that. Ran fine in the San Marcos, but then went to Keeneland, went to Kentucky, and I think he was just on the downswing at that point. Miller has given this horse a little bit of a break. He's got back numbers that fit. He's got Money Mike on him. He's going to be a price. There's a ton of early speed in here. I am fascinated with number 6, Get Her Number, guys. I'm going to use him in all spots underneath. He's going to be one of our price spot plays on our power picks. If it falls apart a little bit and he's right, I think he's absolutely fascinating. Final thoughts on this one or anyone else, guys, before we go to the last?
I have the 6 as an A. He basically was very close to the top 3.
That makes you feel better, Pete.
Yeah, I think it's more, again, he's one that has a little bit of trouble finishing the deal, but I think in a race that if it just heats up, I like him as the best closer, and I think he's not just a good closer, he's quality closer. So I think at that price, he's on my A line for sure.
Yeah, I just, someone's got to close in this race, Paul. I mean, so you would think.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I think that the closing kick might be a little more effective at 6 than 7. So I do like that. I think he's more likely to hit the board than win. Although, as you say, someone does have to close. And if it falls apart, a lot depends on when they turn for home, who's leading. If it's one of the, as you say, quote, cheap speeds, Howard, then the chances of a horse like this getting up are much better.
I would agree. Let's go to the last race, guys. The last race I thought was difficult in the sense there's not a lot of form, but I have a fairly strong opinion in this race. We saw at the bottom of the screen, Pete, you and I are thinking alike. Let's go ahead and show the outcome base. It's maiden special weight on the turf at a mile. It's for the 3-year-olds and up for the boys. It's a field of 12. Now, I know we all know this, but there are some big-time AEs, guys. And so I would caution everyone at home, if the 13, 14, or 16, especially those three. If any of those get in, that might change our picks completely. And I know, Paul, you sent in the 14 on top, and Pete, we're not gonna have time to go through, but you and I would agree that the 13, 14, and 16 all can win. I would assume if they get in, they're actually better than anyone in the main body of the field. At least,
I agree with Paul. The 14, I just didn't use him because he's not in the field.
Right.
But
Me
yes, I
neither.
would. I just for reference sake, if the 14 gets in, he's probably my top choice if he gets in.
Well, let's go to our top choice, Pete, the 4. I watched both of his races really carefully. He's 72 more in line. Both times he had a break from the far outside. He broke okay in both. He's not a push button type. He's a little more grindy, but he has been a little bit wide his last 2, Pete. I don't know if he can sit in behind horses and like accelerate through a gap because he hasn't shown that yet. But I like who he's faced. He faced Yellow Brick and Maltese Falcon, and there's a lot of horses that are just very meh. I just don't like. I think if he gets the trip, I think he's a very likely winner. My only concern, Maldonado for McCarthy, I thought that was a little bit weird. Where's Gutierrez or someone else that's been on this horse? That's literally my only concern. I like Maldonado. I just thought that was a little weird. Maybe I'm reading too much into it.
I try not to figure that stuff out too much, just because I don't think Maldonado's bad. So if it was a jockey that I thought was bad and it was a real downgrade, I mean, it is a downgrade, obviously, from say Saez in the last one, but you know what I mean? It's not a downgrade to where I think it's detrimental to the horse. But the one thing I did like, I think I basically just agree with everything you said for once, which is nice to hear. But the one thing I did like is I thought he ran a winning race. And I thought the 1 1/8 may have gotten to him a little bit, whereas now we're cutting back to the mile. And if he runs that similar race, the first one was just sort of a toss to me. Just broke terrible from the outside, was out of it, but still ran on and didn't quit, ran on at the end. So I think if we can get a similar race to last time, I think he can get the lead again and actually hold at a mile.
Yeah, and
he's a full to Smooth Like Straight too, who is an awesome full brother, brother to Smooth Like Straight, who's an awesome horse.
Legitimate target. This is just a D'Amato I trust kind of thing. I have no idea. I mean, Gell did LASIK coming from Dundalk. We'll see. I mean, I don't know how literally legitimate target is. We'll see. Paul,
I didn't want to lose to that horse, Howard. That was basically because I just don't know. I didn't know what to do with him. And if it was anybody but D'Amato, I'd be like, screw it. Let's try and take that horse out. But with D'Amato, I think you almost have to put him in.
By the way, everyone, I see our wonderful guest coming up in the background, Frank Mirahmadi. So, Frank, if you can hear us, give a little thumbs up, and so we know great. So, Frank, we'll bring you on in just a few minutes. We are very excited to have Frank Mirahmadi on, track announcer at Saratoga. We'll go through our pick fives here, guys, real quick. Before we give our pick fives out, Paul, Maltese Falcon, if he gets in, he's been a bit of a money burner, but he's very logical in this spot.
Yeah, I think so. I like him if he gets in. He's going to need 2 scratches, and you typically don't get a whole lot of scratches out there. So I could very well be on your 4, but I also I think the 13 has a chance if he gets in. Someone mentioned in the chat, Uncle Oscar. You got to take long looks at the Oscar performances first time out and on turf. David Hoffman, first time starter, is not great. Hoffman's 4 for 44 and 0 for 14 on turf. The jock hasn't won, so there's some negatives, but he is going to be a price. I think the 10 has a chance. I think the 3 has a chance. I think the 1 has very good turf breeding. So I think it's fairly wide open.
There's a lot of ways you can go. I'm hoping to be alive to the 4, Pete, and I could like single that horse and just pray, really, because I'm going to go deeper in other legs. Personally.
I know we have to go, but you had the 7 too as your third horse, right? Did you have the 7 the same as me? I think
I did. Watsonville, yeah.
I just want to say with that one, my worry was I don't know if the stretch to a mile is going to work for that horse. But if you watch that race, he had all kind of trouble, got knocked around out of the gate. He was sort of green, then got shuffled, and still was sort of stuck between horses, which I know you hate. Was sort of in between, which is tough for a second-time starter. And then still finally got loose down the lane, but the leader had gotten away. So there was no chance of catching the winner. But I thought that horse ran well. It's just a little scary about him going to the mile. I wasn't sure. But at a decent price, I wouldn't mind finding out.
Yeah, it's a tough race. It's an interesting race to end the car. Let's go ahead and give our picks, our pick 5 tickets here. And then everyone watching, we are very proud to have Frank Mirahmadi on, coming in literally about 4 minutes to talk about his life and what's happening at Saratoga. It'll be a fascinating conversation. So let's go ahead and give our pick 5 tickets, ladies and gentlemen, right now. Here's Pete's pick 5, 4, 5, 6, 9 with 6, with 2, 4, 9, 12, with 2, 4, 6, 11, with 4, 5, 7, $96, Pete.
Yeah, I'll just go quick. The only thing I was going to do, I singled defunded. Not that I think he's sort of unbeatable or anything, but I wanted to go deeper in the other legs, and that was the only logical single. And I kind of want to have a single if I can, if I can't narrow in any of the other legs. And the other ones were all just sort of the logical horses that we talked about, so no need to really get into them too much. But again, I would back defunded up. He's not like a stone cold single to me across the board.
Paul's pick 5 is 1, 4, 6, 9 with 1, 6, with 1, 3, with 2, 7, 9, 11, with 3, 4, and add the 14 if he gets in $96 also. Paul.
Yeah, and if the 14 doesn't get in, Howard, I would obviously add someone somewhere else. I think that the middle leg, I think you got to either be thin, or you mentioned that you're not an all guy, but if you ever were, that would be the leg. So I went with the theory of I'm just going to go too deep and take my chances there, because otherwise it could be 6 or 7 or 8 deep. And so, but this will not be a caveman sequence for me, shockingly.
Okay. My pick 5, guys, I do have a single, and it's on the end. I'm going to single Smooth Salute on the end and just try to get to live to that horse. That's right, Paul. Otherwise, I'd have to use many there. In looking at my ticket, which I'll read right now, I might change the second leg. I'm probably using too many in that race. I've got 1, 6, 9 with 1, 2, 6, 7 with 1, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 12 with 6, 11 with 4. My general thought is I'm very strong on Dr. Shivel and Smooth Salute, and I would spread elsewhere. I suppose Royal Ship and Senior Buscador can't win, guys, but if the pace gets heated, I don't think that's impossible. It's a prep for the Pacific Classic. The funding's not 100% cranked. I don't know. We've seen stranger things, and they can throw in some big numbers. Royal Ship and Senior Buscador, they probably wouldn't be on my A line for sure, but I would consider using them, guys. I think they're fascinating. Pete, we're going to leave you on for just 30 seconds here as we introduce our next guest. Guys, great job, and Del March will be a lot of fun on Saturday. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, everyone watching live and listening later on, I am very, very proud to present one of the best track announcers in the world. We've had many track announcers on this show, but now we are proud to have the track announcer at Saratoga Racecourse, Mr. Frank Mirahmadi. Frank, thanks for joining us. How you doing tonight?
Thanks for the overwhelming and hyped out intro. It's great to be on the show. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Frank. Actually, you and I have met before. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Pete, we're going to let you go. Any quick thoughts or questions or comments for Frank Mirahmadi?
No, I just wanted to say hi, Frank. I have to go take care of my dog upstairs with the family out of town. So I wanted to say hi, though, and maybe we'll get to say hello next week when I make my first ever trip to Saratoga.
Absolutely. I've been trying to figure out what these pictures and decor in the background of your various locations.
Oh, I have everything. Yeah.
I see it. It looks pretty cool. It's definitely
like,
not one of those.
Point out a few real quick, Pete, what you got there for Frank?
What do you got back there?
I mean, it depends what you like. I got some Yankee stuff. I got tons of horses, which back there, which you can't see, Easy Goers and Yada, American Pharaohs, some of the big ones. It's just sort of I like to hang, as my wife says, I like to take up as much wall space as I possibly can and clutter up the walls as much as possible. That's my wife's thought on it. So I put everything that I love is surrounding me at all times, basically.
Excellent. Love it.
Thanks, Pete. Well, take care, Pete.
Yeah.
Next time I see you in person, Pete, we'll be in Saratoga, right?
Yeah, first time I will get to meet Paul and Howard in person next week, which will be fantastic.
All right, Pete. Thanks, buddy.
Guys.
Take care.
Take care. See you,
All
Frank.
right, bye, Pete. All right, Frank, let me first also introduce Paul Howard. If you don't know Paul, he writes for the Saratoga Special, actually. He's been writing with the Saratoga Special for quite a while. big fan, Boston native, Bostonian, Massachusettsian, I would say Massachusetts person. Paul, what do we call a person from Massachusetts? And also, Frank, he's writing a story. He's writing a book on Cody's Wish, actually, and that's very exciting as well. So, Paul, say hello to Frank.
Hello, Frank.
How are you, Paul? You know, something funny about Cody's Wish. When he first started, he had some trouble early in his debut, and I texted everybody who asked me for horses, Cody's Wish, and they all took a beating on this horse early in his career. So just to see what he turned into and what a fascinating story it is, it's hilarious because I've had people remind me about what happened with Cody's Wish when I touted him early in his career, but what a superstar he is, and I'm so excited to be able to call him later. But I love that you're writing a book. It's just a great story, and what an absolute superstar he is.
I'll tell you, Frank, we'll get into it at another time, but you were not the only one. The Godolphin folks were very, very high on him going into his debut. Of course, he was delayed. He didn't debut until May or June of his 3-year-old year. And to the point where, and this is not, this has really not been well reported, but it will be reported in the book. Junior was taken off of him after that first race.
Wow.
And Junior did not ride him for the next 7 races. And Junior got back on him in the Westchester last year because it was Derby Day and most of the New York guys were at Churchill. And he ran in the Westchester. So I can't you stay tuned for more detail on that. But it is a great story, and I'm psyched for you, Frank. Hopefully it goes well, but at this point, it's gone so well to be able to call the Whitney is treat enough for you, Frank.
It's so true. I mean, it's every day. People ask me so many times, what am I looking most forward to? I mean, every day there's a new stake. You just never know who's going to show up and what's going to happen. So kind of hard to take it all in, but it's hard work too. So by the end of every day, I'm completely exhausted. I've never enjoyed sleep. You get 5-6 hours of sleep. It's a beautiful thing.
Well, the few things I want to piggyback off that. First of all, Frank, you're going to see some questions and comments on the bottom of the screen. We've got a ton of people watching and listening as well. Katie, one of our big fans, says welcome. Frank,
Hi,
Ralph
Katie.
Conti, big fan of the show. Frank, the pizza man. We'll have a little pizza discussion here in just a minute. Richard Avillard loved the car talk with JK on Fox. He enjoyed that very much. And Katie also mentioned she loves having you calling the races at Saratoga. So we got a lot of people listening and watching right now. Frank, I want to say this first before we get into some questions from myself and Paul. And I want everyone to know this. Frank, you probably don't remember because you meet 10,000 people. The Del Mar Breeders' Cup in 21 was the first time we actually met in person. And I walked over to you. You were not working that weekend, if I recall.
No.
And I walked up to you, very politely said, I've got a podcast. At that time, this podcast was only about 6 or 7 months old. It's exploded and quadrupled in size right now and is one of the top podcasts on YouTube for horse racing. But you very respectfully declined and said, don't do podcasts. And I totally understood. No problem whatsoever. He said, check in next year and we'll see. I DM'd you last year, I don't know, in the middle of the summer. I respect everyone's privacy, so I didn't want to bother you. And you respectfully said, not yet, et cetera, et cetera. And Paul and everyone else, I want you to know, out of nowhere, ladies and gentlemen, I got a DM, last week from Frank. We hadn't talked in 8 months. I mean, like I said, I respect everyone's privacy. And Frank said, I remember I said, I promised that I would come on your podcast if I end up doing podcasts. And I'm starting to do podcasts again. And I love to come on. So, guys, this is the kind of personality, the kind of mensch, as people in my tribe would say, the kind of great guy that Frank is. He made a commitment and he stuck to it. And Frank, really, from the bottom of my heart, and everyone here at the HHH Racing Podcast, we really appreciate you living up to your word and getting in touch with us and being on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And, you were a gentleman, and I felt bad. I don't like to turn down requests. Believe it or not, I almost turned down Cart Talk. But I actually work with our sponsors as well. And when Gainesway signed up to be on the shows, they wanted Cart Talk with JK. It was actually Sean Tugel, who's not with Gainesway anymore. I owe him a big thank you because when JK asked me when I was arriving in town, it was going to be Monday. And he said, oh, good, Cart Talk Tuesday morning. And I was thought to myself, you got to be kidding me, man. Let me get started here. There's a high profile, a lot of stress going on here. Let me just call. I figured let me call a couple of weeks before we did it. But I did it, and I'm glad I did. When I tell you hundreds of people have come up to me, it's been amazing. At least we know people are watching that segment and they're watching the show. As far as your podcast was concerned, I told you in one of my emails, I really don't do a lot of podcasts, but if I did, that I would definitely do yours. And so I really didn't know a lot about your podcast. I do remember briefly meeting you, but it was a very quick, situation. I remember that. But
just outside the paddock, actually.
Yes, right near Quigley's corner, where Tom Quigley was holding court. And but anyway, so when I did the podcast the other day with someone, I said I felt guilty. I go, man, Howard's going to see this, and he's going to think that's the guy who told me he doesn't do podcasts. So I wanted to reach out to you before you saw any of that happening and say, hey. And I said, I'm not asking you to be on your podcast, but I'm happy to do it. And I'm certainly honored to be on it, and I'm happy to be a part of your deal. And I haven't watched it before, but looks like you guys are digging into some handicapping, and you got to give out some winners and give some insight. More importantly, I learned many years ago when I worked for the people that you've got a hat on for TVG that, a lot of it is about just setting the table properly, because people have their own opinions. And I can tell you this, in my experience in betting, a lot of my best moments of wagering have been incorporating others' ideas with my own. A lot of us are stubborn. We only think we know it all. But if you can, have the open-mindedness to listen to others and just kind of mix and match and do something like that, I think that's an opportunity to be very successful, and maybe more so than just doing it on your own. There's so many times when you just miss one, but maybe your buddy loved that horse. So I like the fact that you guys are getting involved, and I would just tell your viewers and listeners to, listen with an open mind to what everyone has to say. You might just hear a nugget, and that nugget could make the difference between winning and losing.
The gentleman on the bottom of the screen, Matt Miller, is one of the best handicappers in the world when it comes to contests. And Matt will be traveling with me, Frank, this Saturday. I'll be at Saratoga all week long, so hopefully you get a chance to meet you and say hello. I will be there for the full week. It'll be my second time at Saratoga, but Matt Miller down below there says hello. Paul, let's get into some questions for Frank, Paul, and I'll just piggyback off that. And then, Frank, we're going to end our segment a little later on with our famous 10 minutes to post segment, which is rapid fire 10 questions that are some horse racing and some not. You're going to love that. Before we get to that, Paul, fire away with Frank, please.
Yeah, I think, Frank, before we go back to the beginning, if you will, we're now, I think, 11 cards into the meet as of today. And I think you had maybe called on isolated maybe about 5 times at Saratoga prior to this year. And obviously you follow it. You had your expectations coming in and what it would be like, but now you have a pretty good sample size. So tell us, as we're 27.5% of the way through the meet, really how it's been for you.
It's been an incredible experience. I've been doing this for a long time, and I've been to Saratoga, and I think that was a big edge. And I got to give a lot of love and respect and thanks to John Embrial, who really set me up for success with the New York Racing Association from the moment I joined the team when I left Golden Gate Fields at the end of 2017 and took that opportunity to do part-time Aqueduct. I was telling that story recently, and it was inspired by a gentleman named Oscar Katz, who was a very, very strong member of the TV executive world back in his day. He was a lot older than all of us. He was 75 when I was 17. So he's been gone a while, but he told me in life, sometimes your ceiling one place becomes your ground at the next. And Oscar and I were really close friends. And when I left Golden Gate, I actually told them that I just felt like, at that point with the Stronach Group, I had pretty much reached the top of where I was going to be. We had the audition for Santa Anita. I didn't get that job. I was at Golden Gate. They took good care of me. It was all good, but I went to Aqueduct. And so to have the experience of getting into Saratoga, it was a process that took some time to develop. And I'm very grateful for it. And to answer your question, basically, the beginning was overwhelming, but I really tried my best to absorb everything. Opening day was huge because they had me in the morning. They had me do a radio show and they had me do a TV show. And after I did my first TV show, they started taking me all over to the other TV shows. So I guess I was being tested to see if I could handle the media, which was great. But I've been doing that for a long time, but I think they were happy with that. So I was, I didn't sleep much the night before, got up excited, last thing I wanted to do is get there early to be meeting with television stations, but I would never say that. But it worked out really well. I was sweating like you can't even imagine, which was much needed. As you can see, I'm a big boy. So some water was dropping at a rapid rate. The adrenaline was in full gear, going from place to place. And then the first race came up. They wanted a camera in the booth because of the traditional opening, and they're off at Saratoga to get the fans involved. So I called the first race, and I just kept going, and the adrenaline never stopped. I was thinking midway through the card, I may be in a position where I'm going to start drifting out, but that was the furthest thing from the case. It's been very strong. I felt like my energy is really high. It's a challenge. I know everyone's listening. I know there are a lot of critics, but this is the moment. You live for moments like this, and thankfully, I was ready to handle it. I feel very good about what's happened so far, and I'm very, I go in with an extreme amount of confidence as well as humility, because I know that things happen in a race, and you got to turn the page. You got to be strong, but I'm very happy with the way it's gone so far. It is tiring. I will say this: they say Father Time is undefeated. As you get older, no matter what you're doing, it becomes a little more difficult. These are a lot of big fields, a lot of horses I've never seen before. Terrible angles, as beautifully described by Tom Durkin in last year's Card Talk. You couldn't see. Yesterday there was a horse that moved up with Rosario, the one horse with the turquoise colors and the pink cap. I forgot his name, but it was the 1A scratch. But it was right behind the trees. That horse moved from 10th to 4th.
On the rail, right?
On the rail. And I was calling the back, and I go, I know someone's missing. Who the hell was that? And I could know in my brain that there was something missing. And then I saw it, and I tried to kind of make up for lost time by explaining that horse had made steady progress, et cetera, et cetera. But, those are the things that go on. The mind is working at such a rapid rate during a race, trying to figure out, who's moving, what's happening, who's this, what's that. And you're kind of bobbing and weaving in that booth to see them at certain points. And I was thinking to myself that the thing that I don't like ever in calling races is when the public has a better view than I do. And that does happen quite often during the races at Saratoga, just because the TV camera is wide and you can see everything. And the announcer is focused, let's say, on the front of the field, and something may happen at the back of the field. And so, God bless you. So sometimes in those circumstances, I just wish that I could, have a wider lens for my binoculars. But, it's play-by-play. I believe you got to look out there. I have a TV to my right and to my left, which I refer to the fractions for. But in an ideal world, I'm not looking at the television, because track announcer has a pair of binoculars for a reason. But there are times in which, even when they come to the top of the stretch, right before the quarter pole, it's so hard to see out there, particularly if horses are fanned across the track, that I will oftentimes take a quick peek to make sure that everything's under control. It's a weird thing, but there's a lot of movement in that booth going on. But ultimately, it's all about the final product. So sorry for the long-winded answer. I feel it's going well. I was talking to my mom yesterday. She listens, and she tells me, she has told me before, at times in which she felt my energy wasn't at its highest. And she's on me, which is fantastic. She watches every race every day, and I love that.
As if you don't have enough pressure on you, right, Frank? You got mom on your butt.
Mom told me I was better today than yesterday, so that was good.
Well,
but she was just kind of telling me, not to, the whole thing is, sometimes in the middle of a race, I just suddenly absorb, hey, this is Saratoga, buddy, get on it. But it's just the way it is. I'm just constantly trying to motivate myself, because I owe it to the fans, and most importantly to the connections, to give them every single thing, and to hype it up as much as possible. That said, it's a fine line. There are some races that you just can't go over the top on, and it's very difficult to determine when that should be and when it shouldn't be. But I just think high energy and accuracy is what the fans are looking for, and so far, so good. I'm happy with the way it's gone so far, and it should only get better from here.
Frank, we got a quick question from our great viewer. This is from Vale Place on the bottom of the screen. Are you going to live year-round in New York? I can imagine you'll miss California.
No, I'm not. I'm just the voice of Saratoga, so I'm calling it Santa Anita full-time. That was always my dream job, and I'm certainly enjoying it. I've just completed my 5th year there. I guess theoretically it'll be after the fall meet that it'll be 5 full years.
Right.
But, I'm very lucky that they were allowing me to, miss the summertime and to be at other places, because I have to have their approval to work elsewhere based upon our contractual agreement. I haven't had a whole lot of contracts in my time. I've always been I've been a day-to-day guy. Let's face it, if they want you out the door, you're on your way out the door. So at Santa Anita, I do have an employment agreement that requires me to clear anything that I do outside of calling it the Great Race Place.
You do an unbelievable job, Frank, at Santa Anita as well.
Thank you.
Paul, go ahead with the next question.
Yeah, in fact, this is a good way to get into that, I'm not sure everyone's aware of this. You mentioned it in passing. So Trevor Denman leaves in 2016. Of course, he had been the voice of Santa Anita for 20, 30, maybe 30 years.
Yeah.
And there was a protracted audition for the job. There was a 4-way audition, but it seems like you were in the final 2, and you and Michael Rona got the most reps, as they say in NFL training camp. And it didn't work out. So, Michael gets the job in 2016, but you land on your feet. You, at that point, to do that audition, you gave up the job at Oaklawn, didn't you?
I did. It was a daring move, but I had to do it. And, when I first got the call, I was actually calling at Los Alamitos when the call came in from Santa Anita. I went down, which of course, it's like the military. You're not supposed to leave your post. But I went down because a good friend of mine was running a horse that day. And so I went down at Los Al during that meet. So it would have been, I guess, I don't remember. It had to be, it's probably the fall meet, whatever, one of those meets, September or December. I don't remember exactly when it was. But I was called. I saw the phone and I figured it was Joe Morris at the time, and I figured I must have walked right by him, and he was just calling me to say, hey, what are you doing down here, or say hello, or whatever it was. But anyway, they called me. It was him and Amy Zimmerman called me, and they said that they had some confidential news to tell me, that I, not to say a word to anybody, but that Trevor Denman was going to be announcing his retirement the next day, and that And so the first question I had for them, which would have been the appropriate question, is Trevor okay? I was very worried when I heard that because it seemingly just came out of the blue. I didn't know at the time that he was just quitting Santa Anita and he was going to remain at Del Mar. So I was immediately worried because that's my idol and a man who just means the world to me and whose brilliance inspired my career. So as the conversation went on, I assumed that they were basically calling to ask me if I wanted to call at Santa Anita. And, I told them, obviously, I was available immediately and I would happily, move in. But they said that they wanted to bring in Michael. They wanted to let the fans decide. And so they put on an audition and they asked about that. Now, at the time, obviously, they knew me and they knew Michael very well. And, some people think they could have just decided who they wanted at that time. But they wanted to do this. And, this is a world now. We have a lot of competitions. There's a lot of put up or shut ups in the world out there and all kinds of, shows, such as American Idol and The Voice, not to get carried away and put ourselves in that league. But anyway, there's a lot of competition stuff out there in the world. And Michael and I were, very close friends for 25 years. We had worked together on many occasions, including at the fairgrounds and other venues, Turf Paradise, so on and so forth. Michael helped me a lot early in my career. And now this was going to be a situation where it pretty much looked like it was going to be one of us for that job. And to me, that was my dream. Santa Anita is the track I grew up at. Trevor Denman's my idol, and I just felt like that I had to go for that. And I felt that I really would win that audition. I mean, that's what you have to think if you're going to give up a job with the significance of Oaklawn, which was a very big break for me. I remember getting the news that Terry Wallace was retiring. I was on a 110-degree roof at the San Joaquin Fair in Stockton, which was quite the scene up there. Black spiders, sizzling hot. You couldn't even imagine what that thing looked like. You had to climb up through the stewards deal on a ladder to get to the roof. But, that was part of the fair circuit. I remember when I read that because I'd come in and called a race at Oaklawn before. So I got that big job. It was a huge move for my career. It was a great opportunity. And perhaps the nicest people I've ever met have been in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And so I really had a great gig over there. And at that point, I had Monmouth Park as well. So, I mean, you couldn't really ask for anything more. But Santa Anita calls, you got to show up. So I went to the audition. I went in there. We both could have done better than we did. We both did very well. And, I felt he did an amazing job. And they gave him the job. And I think I handled that like a gentleman, like I should, which is accepting the decision that was made. And I just, basically congratulated him with sincerity. And it was a very big disappointment. I actually knew that was happening, though. It was a weird situation. Like I knew as the thing was getting late There were signs, there were hints, there were things, but I tried my heart out. I gave it everything I had, and unfortunately, they didn't pick me at that particular time. It happens, but.
Well, I think there's a lesson there, Frank, though, right, for everyone, because to give up Oaklawn, we talk about Oaklawn a lot on this show, especially in the winter when things are slower in New York and, even before Santa Anita gets cranked up. And, to have the you-know-whats, the Cagliones, as they might say, and you're Italian, I'm half Italian, Frank, to do that, there's a great lesson in that. And, of course, 2 years later, you get the call and you end up getting the job next time around. But in my opinion, the most impressive thing about you is the willingness to give up that gig just to try out for that job, because it says truly how badly you wanted it.
I mean, you got to go for that. I mean, I grew up, you got to understand it. Also, Saturday, I filled in. Keep in mind, there were a couple of other elements to this situation. In 2014, when I didn't get the Monmouth Park job, which was a monumental disappointment, I had a 13-minute phone interview with Bob Kalina. And when I hung up the phone, I mean, I still can't believe they didn't hire me then. Not because of, they ended up hiring Travis Stone, who's a tremendous race caller and a good young man and a very talented individual. But I couldn't believe that with that conversation, it didn't result in a job offer, is what I'm saying. But that was another thing in my life that turned out to be a blessing in disguise, because that year, amazingly, it turned out that Santa Anita called me to fill in for 10 days. So, as I said to Mom the next year when I interviewed for the job after Travis went to Churchill Downs, I said to them, look, guys, I was so disappointed last year when I didn't get this job. However, let me say this, since I saw some Yankee reference a little while ago, it'd be like a kid who grew up in the Bronx. If he could play 10 days for the Yankees, or he could play 3 months for the Mets, you know what the answer is going to be for him. It's going to be a no comparison situation, give him the pinstripes, right? So to me, to call 10 days at Santa Anita, and I said this to the guys in the interview, which I would pay for a video of that interview when I interviewed for the job the following year in 2015. It was a classic. But I said, look, it worked out. And in fact, when I took the job in 2015, I told them, I said, if Santa Anita wants me to fill in, I got to go. And they understood and they worked around my schedule for that. They were very cool about it. But the bottom line is, it turned out that I was in that situation where I'd already called twice. Now they're calling me to do the audition. So I just felt like I was the home team there, even though I wasn't, you know what I mean? I grew up in LA. That's a track I was attending in the 70s. I watched Vigors there. I watched Spectacular Bid there. I watched John Henry and both of his big caps there. So many races, so many days. So many times I left school early to go there, left jobs early. I was delivering for a pharmacy in West Los Angeles. I went out to Santa Anita and snuck in there. I remember, when I took a final exam one day, this was hilarious. I was in high school. My best friend, Elon, who I lost years ago, a few years back, devastating, man. He was my best friend, like my brother. And Elon, I turned him into a horse fan. And I remember one horse he made money on was a horse named Sang. And he also made money on a horse named Norbet on several occasions. And Elon and I were best of buddies. And anyway, one day at Beverly Hills High School, where we both went, he was a year older than me. I said to him, when you're done with your final, you come down and I was taking my English final at that point. And, in the classrooms, they have those little windows, like where you could just kind of fit a face in there maybe. And I remember I had like 6 answers left. It was a Scantron test. And there were like 6 answers left. And his face showed up in that window. And I knew it was time to go. And at that point, I was never getting an A in that class. I was probably going to get a B. If I really took a beating in that thing, maybe a C. But I was not getting an A. And I remember at the end, I said to him, I go, my last 6 answers were a bunch of 5-to-1 shots, like B, C, A, D, E, because I didn't care about anything. And like, that's ridiculous on one part, but on the other part, the fact I could tell this story and smile about it and remember my buddy and the way I used to just convince him we have to go to Santa Anita, and he would drive me there all the time because at that point he was able to drive and I wasn't 16 yet, so I couldn't drive. Those are moments that I just cherish forever. And so, I thought going to Santa Anita, like, to me, this is a place I watched every race my whole life. They've heard me call. They brought me back after the first year filling in. I thought I was the favorite in that thing. And they picked Michael. And Michael's, was quoted in the Los Angeles Times. I thought he did a better job in that audition, and I'm not embarrassed to say that. He did great. He stepped up. I thought my best was out there. There's a line and a word that the late Steve Sexton told me when he picked Michael over me in the Lone Star Park job, because when I didn't get that job, Steve Sexton, may he rest in peace. I never met him, but he certainly was a top class guy. But he said to me specifically, this is a long time ago, he said, I'm not going to tell you were our second choice. I'm going to tell you were 1A. It was a very close decision. And we went to Michael because of the following reasons. And I certainly respected where he was coming from. When, Fairgrounds hired Michael many years ago, I was the backup announcer. I called the first 7 weeks of the meet. And so we worked together quite a bit during those times. I felt like if ever there was the time where the two of us, if you just think about it, I mean, if you try to draw like an analogy, it was just like that was the showdown that I could hope for, would be at Santa Anita is the only thing I could ever ask for, because that's my home track. I've had some spins around the track by calling like I had to do it. It was a no-brainer to me. And in the end, they gave it to him. And then a couple of years later, when management changed, they called me and they offered me the job. And there was a lot of chatter about how that happened, what happened. What happened is the word that Steve Sexton used when he didn't pick me is it's subjective. And that's exactly what it is when you pick a race caller, because you're picking somebody that you feel is going to do the best job for your racetrack. And at the time when the management was different, they wanted to have me and they offered me the job, and it was something I couldn't turn down. I said it before, I'll say it again, and it's the truth. I never called Santa Anita. I would never give Santa Anita the satisfaction of calling them again to say, hey, do you want to hire me? They didn't hire me when they did. And I left Golden Gate Field. So I wasn't trying to get that job under any circumstances. But when they called me, it was a job I accepted. And it's unfortunate that it was at his expense, because he was a guy who was very good to me, a very close friend of mine. And unfortunately, those things happen in a profession when you just, a job like that comes open, you have to take it. And I did. And it was just something that I felt was God's grace, is the way I looked at that, not as anything other than that amazingly, I didn't get the job. I got very sick a couple of months after that audition, to the point where I couldn't care where I was calling races. I was glad to call anything. I was glad to be on this side of the soil after what I went through. So things come into proper perspective sometimes in life, and you realize that, things that we think are that important really take a backseat to more important things, such as your health. So to get the job there was an amazing thing for them to get me. And then for this to happen, these are two things that I would have never, ever imagined happening after I didn't get that job in that 2016 year. But a lot of things changed, and I'm trying to seize the moment and just, do the best I can and accept this blessing, and make sure that on a daily basis, on a race by race basis, that I am absolutely giving every ounce of my soul to what I do. And I do that, and it makes me feel very fulfilled. So right now, even though it's a tough gig, it's high pressure, it's what I dream of, and it's what I want to make sure I do better at every day. Like I watch races, I watch replays of the races. I always think, what could you have done better? What could you have said better? What could you have seen better? And that's the way everyone should be in every facet of work and life.
Well, Frank, you do a great job, and you're very worthy of everything you've gotten. We're very happy that your health scares are over and you're doing well, and we're happy about that. Do you have a few minutes for our 10 minutes of post segment?
I'm good, man. I'm just hanging out at home, and when we're done, it's safe to say it'll be lights out over here, and I'll be sleeping.
I hear you. I know we need your voice for tomorrow, so I said a half an hour, but we'll go a little bit late.
I enjoy talking. I enjoy sharing. I had a 10-minute conversation with a guy and his nephew on the way out the track today. I'm a man of the people. That's what the Mirror Man song is, right? He's a people man.
Absolutely. All right, Frank, well, let's go to our last segment. It is called 10 Minutes to Post. 10 Minutes to Post. Frank, these are going to be 10 rapid-fire questions. 5 of them are related to horse racing. 5 are who knows. Are you ready for 10 Minutes to Post?
Please, bring it.
And you can answer these in 5 seconds or a minute. Take as long or as short as you want. Paul and I are going to alternate going first. I'll go first. Here it is on the bottom of the screen, Frank. What was the first moment you fell in love with horse racing?
It was probably before I even remember it, but I know this. by the age 9, I was devastated that my dad wouldn't take me to watch Seattle Slew in the sweepstakes at Hollywood Park. I wasn't even 10 years old. I was very upset about that. So to give you an idea, at that point, I was so into it that I didn't care about seeing Lakers games, Rams games, Dodgers games. I just wanted to go to Hollywood Park, Santa Anita, and an occasional trip to Del Mar. I would say very young. By the age of 8, 7 for sure, it was over. That was the only thing I wanted to watch. I loved getting autographs from the jockeys, and I remember those moments vividly.
Paul, you've got the next question.
Oh, this is a good one because Frank's been around. Your bucket list racetrack or event you would like to attend?
That is a very, very good question because I've been to so many places that I would think. Let me just think about that. I've been to Churchill Downs. I've seen 2 Kentucky Derbies live. That's an experience everybody should have at least once. And both times the California horse won, California Chrome won, and American Pharoah won the other one. So a place I'd like to attend.
It can be overseas also, Frank.
I know. I'm thinking about it. I'll tell you what it would be. It would be probably the Melbourne Cup. That would be
That's
amazing.
been a very popular one on this show.
That would be the answer because Greg Miles, who has called that race many times, is one of, and anyone who said he's the best of all time, I wouldn't argue with them. I'm a Trevor man, but Greg Miles with that voice and that delivery certainly has painted some incredible pictures. I would think that because I was in Australia once in 1990, and for whatever reason, where I was at the time, they weren't having a meet, and I didn't get to see live racing there, and their fans absolutely love the sport.
Oh, that's a great race. Like 28 horses, and the stretch goes on forever. It's fantastic. I know you're a gambling man, Frank. You like to throw a few bucks on the horses. Do you have a favorite track that you like to wager on when you're not?
I would say, typically speaking, it's the New York racing because that's what I follow most closely. When I'm working, obviously, I do everything in my human power to stay away from it, and so the good news about my Saratoga job. I've been getting absolutely run over at Saratoga for years, and now with me just calling the action, I don't have to worry about that. This is going to be the first in the last 9 years that there will not be a net loss at Saratoga. I do prefer wagering on New York racing, and obviously my whole life would be Santa Anita first in every category of horse racing in general. But I love the Breeders' Cup cards wherever they are located. And the big days, those are good opportunities if you could beat some of those favorites along the way. But I would say if there was one place I'm undefeated at was Suffolk Downs. I was there in 1989, and I won $2,000, and I didn't have much with me when I went. I pretty much, it was like one of those let it ride days. I won like every race. There was a gray horse, number 6, that was my. I don't remember who he was, but I remember the general time frame. It was definitely 89. And by the way, I was the voice of the Great Barrington Fair. You'll be happy to know as well.
Yeah, I'm aware.
And that story has come up big during my visit here. And when I went to New Haven, I drove right by Exit 10 and that beautiful. I'm not a guy that usually gets enamored by surroundings, but that drive through Massachusetts, man, that is a beautiful part of the world. The Berkshires. I actually saw Saving Private Ryan at that historic theater in downtown Great Barrington. So,
wow.
Favorite track. I've never had any luck in Florida tracks, Gulfstream. I joke with Pete Aiello often. I'll tell him I hate Gulfstream Park in a joking manner, obviously, because it's so difficult. Calder was the most impossible track of all time. I would say that probably Belmont Park. If I had to pick one place that I feel like I'm solid at, it would be Belmont Park would probably be the best. But to me, it's very important, no matter where it is, to watch the horses in the post parade. I think that's a very, very important thing. I trust what I'm looking at, and I think that's way better than my handicapping. But if I had to pick one track to bet at nationwide and just make sure, I think Belmont Park would be the answer.
Paul, you got the next question? Tough question.
Oh, another good one. Most exciting race you have seen in person?
It's funny you mentioned that because I've had the privilege of calling some incredible races, including
yes, you have.
I called American Pharoah's Arkansas Derby. But I must say this. The most exciting race I've ever watched in person is actually the best sporting event I've ever attended in person. And that was Zenyatta's Breeders' Cup Classic win. And I didn't pick Zenyatta. I didn't need Zenyatta. I didn't want Zenyatta. But the truth of the matter is that was the most incredible thing I've ever seen at the racetrack. Right before the race, maybe about 10, 15 minutes before, I ran into the legendary breeder, John Harris. And he's been very kind to me always, and just a good man on so many levels. And he invited me to his box. He was with a good friend of his, and he invited me and my guests to this box right near the finish line. And we watched that thing develop. And the reaction from the crowd, I had tears in my eyes, and it wasn't because I just took a beating in the race. It wasn't because it was just that kind of moment. It was unbelievable, just as Trevor said in that call. It's something I'll never forget. My buddy Justin was there, and we just got to enjoy that. My buddy Anthony was there. It was one of those days for the record books, and something I'll never forget.
Well, you might have just answered the next question, Frank, but do you have a favorite race call, whether one of your own or someone else's?
Yes, I do. And I think my best race call to date, at least, before I got to Santa Anita, because now I've called some races at Santa Anita that I might have to upend my Arkansas Derby call. But my call of American Pharoah in the Arkansas Derby was a great call. And it was great in part because of my good friend Larry Letterman, because I talked to him before it. I called the Rebel, and I said to Larry, who's the most entertaining track announcer of all time, if you need a laugh and some good shtick, that's the guy you wanted to listen to. If you could find some of his old races at Frantic City, Atlantic City, just off the chart stuff. But anyway, I called him before, and I asked him, I said, look, Victor Espinoza is just sitting with this grip on this horse. And he's never asked him. And I just can't think of what to say if that happens again. And Larry, in vintage, immediate, nonchalant, he goes, we all know the answer. The way he said it was just so quick. And that stuck in my mind. And in the Arkansas Derby, when they turned for home, it was the same story again. He started opening up, and I said he was putting on a show. And I said, he has not been asked a question, but everyone knows the answer. So it wasn't his exact words, but it was definitely what he said. And so I've always given him credit for that, because it was a great line, and it was executed, and he performed. And I really felt at the very end of that call, I said, that is one special horse. And as a result of that race call, the Zayat family reached out to me, and they invited me to spend the entire week with them, put me up at the Galt House, and then for the Derby night at the Hilton Garden Inn. And I got to spend the night with them. Spend the week with them from his last workout that day, a week before the Derby. The whole experience was something that was just, I could write a book about myself, because I got to experience a lot of the family and the rituals and what they went through, and so on. All that said, my favorite race call of all time happened at Churchill Downs in the year 2000. And it was All-Star Announcers Day. And Luke Kripos, the legend that he was, and such a good guy that he was, and perhaps his best quality was his level of humility. A lot of people like to name drop and tell you they're going to dinner with this person, or that person called them, or this or that or the other. But Luke invited me, and he was the kind of guy that would say to me when he was working at Kentucky Downs or Ellis Park, he said, hey, I got to go out with my best friend tonight. He's the guy in the jocks room that does the laundry. That always sticks in my mind, because Luke was just a real guy, and he wasn't all about fluff and hype. But Luke invited me to be a part of that, and he had arranged with them to let me call two races that day. One is myself in the middle of the card, which was an unbelievable experience. I'd never even been to Churchill Downs. In fact, my bags were in the press box, because I couldn't even get to my hotel before I came in. So I was like a European shipper, shipping right in, bags in the press box. I called one race, but the last race I called was the last race of the day. And I called it as everybody who had called that day. So to give you an idea of who it was, when they got to the gate, I introduced him as Marv Albert. I was doing Marv Albert and D. Wayne Lucas going to the gate. And I said, when they went to the gate, I said, let's go to the starting gate for the finale. And for the call, we kick it off with Sean Byrne and Vic Stauffer. So I had Sean Byrne, Vic Stauffer at the gate. I started the race. There was a couple others in there, but I started the race as Luke Kripos. May God rest his soul. I then moved from him to John Asher, who may God rest his soul as well.
Too. Yeah.
What a great line. When the job was open for the Churchill Downs job, John and I had talked about that, and I was supposed to go in for an interview, and the interview didn't happen, and they hired Travis for that job, and they did a great job in hiring him. But I'll never forget when I called John Asher to ask him what was going on. like, because I was supposed to go in for an interview and there was a big snowstorm, and that thing, basically that blizzard took me out in more ways than one, but I didn't get to my interview and I didn't get that job, but it's okay. But I remember a line that he said to me, which was, over here in Kentucky, he said, we like to sip a little bourbon and deliberate. I'll never forget that. And I was on with John way after that situation on a radio show with him. And I'm glad I had the chance to get to know that man. What a beautiful human being he was. But anyway, I went from Luke to John Asher to Mike Battaglia to Tom Durkin. And then I went from Durkin to Trevor Denman and to Dave Johnson. I have that copy somewhere. I found it a couple years ago during the pandemic. I found the disc that my man Dennis Swanson, whose real name was Dennis Thompson, but for whatever reason we called him Dennis Swanson when he was at Louisiana Downs. He taped that deal. And I know it's somewhere. I couldn't find it. I've been trying to find it recently because I want to post that with the permission of the Twin Spires. I want to post that call because that call was just an incredible experience. And what made it so special for me is Trevor Denman was there. And Trevor's not a guy, anyone who knows him knows that he's not a guy who like socializes with everyone too much. He's kind of keeps quiet. And that's kind of part of his appeal. Part of his appeal is that he's just unreachable. But he saw me that day and I told him what was going to happen. And he told me he's going to wait and watch that race. And that meant so much to me. This is my idol in the year 2000. Waiting. And he watched it. And when the race was over, he came to the booth. And when that race was over, Dave Grenning of the Racing Form and Jay Pridman both stood up from that view of the announcer booth. You could see those guys. They stood up and gave me a standing ovation, which was a real special thing to me. And it was Luke and I in the booth. And Trevor Denman came in and he said, Frank Mirahmadi, you're a magician. How do you do it? And I, for me to hear that from him, forget about it. And then the best part about it is that was a quote for just the three of us, obviously. Later that week or the following week, Luke Kreipos was a radio guest with Mike Willman on Thoroughbred Los Angeles. And Mike asked him, what did Trevor think of the impression? At which point Luke said, Trevor called me a magician. So that would be my favorite race call, and I think my best one that I ever did. And I hope to find it because I found it, and now I can't find it. But I know it's somewhere in a bunch of boxes, and when I do, I'm going to post it, and I think people will enjoy that call.
Well, the one on YouTube from Turf Paradise that goes like a minute and a half is just, a class. I love listening to that one. Jeff Chapman is here. Chappie says hello from Blazing Hot Arcadia. So hello, Jeff. Jeff's been on our show also. A great guy. Frank, if I may, I've had a lot of track announcers on the show. You've already mentioned we've had Tom Durkin on, we've had Vic Stauffer. I love the great track announcers. If you don't mind, I have a 1-minute clip. I asked Paul Allen, who I think is one of the most underrated track announcers in the country. He actually was out of California before he went to Canterbury. I'm sure you're familiar with Paul.
Got the job at Bay Meadows. I'll never forget it. I opened the forum. I was at Los Al that day. I had met Paul, and he and I were on some ridiculous show with a guy named the Mighty Man, Mike Stevens. Paul was writing for the Pasadena Star News. I was an aspiring track announcer, and I did those voices. And we were on that show. I know Paul and I would both pay big money to get a copy of that show from that Downey restaurant with the red red boots.
Well, here I asked Paul Allen. He was on the show. He's been on the show twice, but I asked him this little clip. It's about a minute, if you don't mind, Frank. I think you're going to find it fascinating. I asked Paul what was his favorite race call of all time. I'm going to let you hear what he has to say. This was Paul Allen, track announcer at Canterbury Park, on this show approximately 2 years ago.
I would point them to Tom Durkin. The year Cigar won the Breeders' Cup Classic, and he beat Le Carriere, Soul of the Matter, can't remember, 96, 95, whatever. Yeah. You pick that thing up at the 3/8 ball. When Durkin, Cigar's moving so fast, Durkin's going through the field, and he's so dramatic. He's just so theatrical. I just love him. And blah, blah, blah. Free prolongs to go, Cigar! And he makes his move. And, then he carries us to the top of the stretch, and he's just dressing it up. And he gets caught, because I know this game, he gets caught not taking a breath at the 8th ball. So it's down by the 16th now, and Jerry Bailey, the way Durkin was just exasperated because he missed that breath. is like calling on Cigar for everything he has, and it just stretches out. And
Yeah.
from the 3/8 on, that Cigar Breeders' Cup Classic, that is the best patch of race call ever created.
The incomparable,
Boom.
unbeatable,
My man.
Cigar. Frank, any thoughts on that incredible race call from Durkin for Cigar?
It was an incredible call. And, the other thing that he said in that call was, he wants to go. And Jerry Bailey says, no, not yet. So that call was amazing. You can never hear it enough times. There has been a long debate as to whether he says incomparable or inconquerable, and it's actually inconquerable. He clarified that.
He clarified that on our show too. Yes.
Yeah. And
he did.
Tom Durkin is a legend, and he has delivered masterful call after masterful call. And most importantly, he has stepped up in those moments. But the ending there of that incredible campaign, believe it or not, it was just on Cart Talk because it was the deal where they were, Jonathan was just interviewing Bill Mott on this week's Cart Talk. So I saw that this afternoon. Isn't that crazy that you would bring that race up today? And I saw that. I love the way he says it when Jerry Bailey said not yet. But Tom's ability to paint that picture similar to the way he painted the picture when it was Victory Gallop and Real Quiet, when Victory Gallop denied Real Quiet, the ending of that race, the ending of the test between you and Carson Hollow. It's those moments to be able to seamlessly come with the line. And it's nice to see Paul Allen on there. Paul had me at Canterbury. They flew me in 1999, and I called the whole card there doing different voices, including a Paul Allen impersonation. And Paul was nothing but a gentleman. I stayed at his house, and he was super cool to me. And I used to call him in the booth once in a while at Bay Meadows if I had a bet down. I remember I bet 50 to win in place on a horse one day, and Paul was doing what I like to tell Al Stahl when Al Stahl has had to call me before to hear a call. I say, look, I'm going to give you a little ISO cam, so you're going to get a little more description about your horse so you know what's going on. So I remember in the race, particularly, it was a Friday night at Bay Meadows. I bet 50 to win in place on a horse, and Paul was listening to it. Paul was calling it, and I could tell he was giving me a little extra description. And at the end of the race, he picks up the phone. He goes, you lost a hunch. Click. So my horse was nowhere, and he made sure I knew that during the race call as well. He's had an amazing career. He's a man of faith and an extremely talented individual. His football calls have been beyond off the charts, and good for him because he's a guy who started, and he's a guy who learned from the master Trevor Denman himself.
He is. I'm a big fan of Canterbury Park. We got 5 non-horse racing questions, Frank, if you have 5 more minutes, and then we'll let you go. Problem. I'm going to go first here, Paul, with this one. Frank, most nervous you've been when meeting a celebrity?
Most nervous I've been when meeting a celebrity. Let me think about that for a minute, because I didn't go and see Al Michaels, and I didn't go and get Rodney Dangerfield. Both of them were in my grasp to meet them. That is such a good question. I'm going to take a few seconds live to just try to think about some of the celebrities that I've met in my time.
We know you've met many, that's for sure, and you've met some of them as well, of course.
I've met so many celebrities. So let me just think about like actors. Let me think about like football players. Man, that's a tough question. I hate to not answer a question. Let me just think. Hold on. I hate to drag this out. What's the matter with you? You never met Robert De Niro. You never met him. My goodness, who did I meet that I really was like? I can't think of an answer for it. I feel bad. I want to answer that question.
That's right. We'll go on to that.
It's like an X in Family Feud. I'll try to come back to it.
There we go.
Paul, go ahead. We have time on the clock at the end.
Okay, we can come back to that.
Yep.
Paul, you got the next one.
Your favorite athlete growing up?
It might be growing up as like how young? Does it matter what age time?
Well, none of us have ever grown up, Frank. So you got a wide window.
Favorite athlete growing up? I mean, as a kid, I would say maybe Johnny Bench, and I'll tell you why. My brother and I would play pitcher catcher sometimes, and my grandfather bought me the Johnny Bench glove, where it had the little whatchamacallit around it, the target around it, and so when I got that was one of my favorite presents. I did like the Big Red Machine. It was after they had won their World Series, but I used to wear a Cincinnati Reds helmet, to school. But let me just quickly think, like football, baseball, basketball. I mean, I love Magic Johnson too. I love that Laker team in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna have to go with Johnny Bench because I think when we're kids, we're at our that's our most true feeling, and getting that glove of Johnny Bench's was very important to me. And I recently saw something where he was, I think with maybe John Velasquez or something, and I just smiled and I commented on that on Twitter. So Johnny Bench was a monster. That team was amazing too, and George
Joe
Foster
Morgan,
batting
Dave
fourth.
Concepcion.
Yeah, number 13. Believe me,
Absolutely.
Dan Dreesen at first, Cesar Geronimo batting eighth.
Geronimo.
That was some team.
Oh, that was
after
team.
Tony Perez, so I wasn't on the Tony Perez team. Pete
Yeah.
Rose, obviously. Then Ray Knight, good night, Ray Knight.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a pretty solid team.
That team kicked my Chicago Cubs asses all the time. We got 3 more quick questions, Frank. We really appreciate your time tonight. I'll be in Saratoga Springs beginning Saturday. Where should I go for pizza, Frank? Maybe the most important question of the night.
It's the easiest answer of all time. You go to Nove. I just tweeted about that. It's 100%.
Go.
Try their Sicilian pizza. I would say light cheese, and because sometimes too much cheese is just too much. Now, keep in mind, I'm a big boy, so I'm like a car, and the cheese light is on. So it's like the oil light. So to me, the cheese light is always on. But here's the deal about cheese. Take it from a guy that could easily weigh 500 pounds if I didn't curtail the cheese. Once you taste it, you've tasted it. So like you don't need to put think about if you ever put cheese aside on a meal, it turns into like a baseball. Just picture that bomb dropping in your stomach. You don't really need a whole lot of cheese. But the pizza bread that they serve as an appetizer going in would be something that I would say is it's as good or better than any other pizza. But Nove for sure. Their other food is great too. Keep in mind, I don't eat meat, chicken, or fish, but all their fish and other dishes like that I've heard are just off the charts. And Louis Laz, if you're having a problem getting a table, just make sure you say, Frank said I could get a table since he tweeted about your restaurant. And watch how fast that'll show up. Because Louis, and he likes to go by Lou, but Lou Lazzanero, I was with him last week. And I won't get into the details because he wasn't talking to me, but the speech he gave a guy was one that I'll never forget. I just loved every bit of it. It was done with such class and concern for this individual that it was just something that I really enjoyed. And so that's an added touch. And you never know who you might run into there. Mike Rapoli, the Pletchers. There's all kinds of personalities you'll find at Nove. Make sure you get there. It's an 8-minute drive from the track.
I will be there Monday night for a charity event through Keisha Clement's charity that she has with her mother. I will be there with Matt Miller. 2 more questions. Here we go.
I'm still trying to think about celebrity. Like I can't believe
Bo Derek, Frank. I
met Bo Derek. Bo Derek. I can tell you this. Bo Derek was in the booth with me with a group, and it was at Oaklawn, and a Shadwell horse trained by Dan Pites at a big price won the race. I don't remember the horse's name, but certainly it was. She's as beautiful now as anyone could ever imagine. But they named the movie correctly about her as a young lady when they came with a 10. Let me know if you're coming with a 9. Let me know how she lost a point.
More like an 11, I would say.
Yeah.
Whoops, sorry. Paul, that you got the next one.
Oh, all right. Let's go with the Rams. Your favorite Ram? Who are the best Ram? Jack Youngblood or Eric Dickerson or someone else? I know how to answer that.
Got to ask you the LA Ram question, Frank.
There's nothing wrong with the LA Ram question. Believe it or not, as a kid, and a lot of people, especially here in New York, wouldn't be happy about this, but I was a Dallas Cowboys fan. And so one time, a guy named Herb Freed, his name was Happy, made a deal with me and my dad. And he said that if I changed my eating and started eating eggs every morning, he'd give me 50-yard line tickets to a Rams Cowboy game. I started eating eggs. I hate eggs, although eggs are a part of chocolate chip cookies, but I like it that fashion rather than the actual egg. But I was killing the taste with bread. And I called him up. I go, Mr. Freed, I don't want the tickets. And he laughed so hard. I was like 11 years old. And I went to the Rams Cowboy game. It was like the worst game ever played by Roger Staubach. He threw 4 interceptions. They got blown out. And one of them was a pick 6. It was a disaster. That's a great question. But since, I do know that defense wins championships, I hate to not go to Eric Dickerson because he's such a freak. But I think Youngblood would probably be the better Ram in that situation. That guy was a force. He was a terror for the offenses.
Oh, man. He played with broken bones. And I'll tell you, my Chicago Bears took care of Eric Dickerson in the 85 NFC Championship game, which I still remember very well. Mike Singletary helped shut that young man down. But that was a great team. This.
Do you know the words of the Super Bowl Shuffle by heart?
I know some of them.
But
they don't want to hear me sing, Paul. But I know. I'm sure I've got the record somewhere. Maybe
I'm the funky QB known as McMahon. When I hit the turf, I've got no plan. How's that?
Used to love that. That kid. I was in middle school at that time. It was
what a team that was.
Oh,
I wish I had the fridge at like 75-1. They cleaned up on the in Vegas with that bet. I love that. All the coaches, everyone.
Unbelievable. That was a fun team. Last question comes from me, Frank, and I've got to ask you this to finish it out. Your favorite impression, and can we hear whatever one you want to do? I don't want to put you on the spot, but give us a little impression on the show, man. And we really thank you for being on the HHH Racing podcast. It's been fantastic.
Thank you so much. I would have to say my favorite would be Trevor Denman because, like I said, at Santa Anita, when they introduced a radio station there called K-Win, it was an on-track deal where basically what Trevor would do is he'd say, "The horses are approaching the starting gate." My voice is a little shot right now, so it's not my best Trevor. If I had a drink, I would. In fact, I do have a drink. Stand by. Take a quick sip of water.
Oh, this guy, if his voice breaks in the middle of one of the calls tomorrow, I'm going to feel awful about it.
Don't worry about a thing, man. I got chloroseptic. I'll be spraying. It's real nasty taste, but it does the job. Don't worry about any of that. But anyway, so he would say, like, the horses are approaching the starting gate. And so you could listen on your earphones or a Walkman or whatever it was in that time. Then he would come on the air with just the on-track audience listening to K-Win, which you could only hear at Santa Anita. And he would then give insight into what he saw in the post parade and how he might have thought. And Trevor's not a gambler, but he's a guy that had incredible insight pre-race to be able to tell you what he saw. And so it was through he had a segment at Santa Anita called Foreign Form, where he would assess time form ratings of the various participants and how they might be able to run at Santa Anita that day. And when Golden Pheasant, who I'm going to have to rank as my favorite horse, because I think that even though I've had other great horses that I've loved, Golden Pheasant, I think, if I was to really thank a horse for getting my career going, Golden Pheasant took my love of Trevor Denman to a whole new level. And it was when he made his U.S. debut in a very salty allowance race that I was in the Santa Anita infield, where I like to hang out in the infield, because in the infield, the speakers that they had, you could hear Trevor just blasting in your ear, and that's all I wanted to hear because there's a lot of noise at the racetrack. But also, you can watch the race around you and then go to the TV so you get every view at the same time. It's a beautiful thing. Or it was. When Golden Pheasant made his U.S. debut for Wayne Gretzky in the Suma stable and Charlie Whittingham, Chris McCarron rode him that day. Gary Stevens rode him when he won the Arlington Million. But Trevor said, "When I looked at the past performances, I thought it was a misprint. I thought this guy would be in the San Luis Rey or an equivalent based on his form, but he actually qualifies for this allowance race." And so he went into this whole thing. And at that point, I bet every penny in my pocket on Golden Pheasant. He broke slowly, and he mowed down a good horse by the name of Fly Till Dawn, as well as another talented horse owned by Jeff Siegel and his Clover Racing partnership with Barry Irwin called Canitor. It was a very, very good race, and Golden Pheasant mowed him down. And so I started to really follow Golden Pheasant. And when he won the Arlington Million, I happened to be in Las Vegas that day, and I specifically went to the Golden Nugget to watch him because I thought that was good luck. And I remember I had this Microsoft bag that was carrying my my stuff because I was working in the computer industry at that time, and it was from one of those trade shows, probably Comdex or something. But I remember that bag, and I remember walking through downtown. But so I called Trevor afterward, and I thanked him for that. And he said, I don't bet these horses, but I did have my $20 there on Golden Pheasant. And the thing that he said to me that day is, he goes, "You just knew that Charlie was prepping him in the Eddie Reed." And Eddie Reed, a grade 1 big race, but Charlie Whittingham was prepping him for the Arlington Million. And he sure showed up that day when he ran down with approval. I met Wayne Gretzky one day, and he was more impressed with when I told him about horse racing. We started talking about with approval, and he loved that conversation. I'm still kind of stuck on who I was most nervous about. I really have been trying to multitask and figure it out, because I know there have been moments that I've met people that I'm just so starstruck by, but for whatever reason, I haven't come up with it tonight.
Well, I'll tell you what, Frank, I'm going to be at Saratoga starting Saturday. I'll be there all week long. Paul will be there next Tuesday. We'll find you, or I'll get in touch with you, and you can give us our answer at that time. Frank Mirahmadi, you've been an absolute pleasure to have on the show. It's been such a joy to go down memory lane, and we wish you a ton more success and doing the great job you're doing at Saratoga and Santa Anita, and just keep doing what you're doing, man. You're killing it. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing both of you guys here at Saratoga. Please come up and say hello, and maybe we'll meet afterward. And maybe there's a little place by the Shake Shack. A lot of people like to congregate after the races. There's a little bar there. We'll make sure that we hang out there and say cheers.
We'd love to buy you a beverage or a sandwich or whatever you'd like. Frank, thanks a lot, man. Really appreciate it.
Frank.
Good luck for your calls tomorrow, Frank.
Thanks for having me on, guys. I really enjoyed it.
Take care. Good night. Bye-bye. All right. What a great guy. Unbelievable. Gave us an hour. I feel bad. I know Frank can probably still hear. I said, we only really have him on for half an hour, but, he loves to tell stories, and I certainly didn't want to interrupt him. And we know everyone here, Paul, appreciates the time that he gave us and the stories, and just a pleasure to listen to.
Oh, absolutely. And he referenced it, but, it's a grind. You listen to those guys. This is the ultimate in pressure in that job. You get the Breeders' Cup and the Derby, I get it. But on a day-to-day basis, the microscope is just, you have one mishap. And especially now, 20 years ago, if someone saw the replay, they saw the replay. But now, with everything going on social media, and there are the morons out there who just love to take people down. But no, we know that. And I got to tell you, he really, we didn't talk a lot about his calls up there, because the other stuff was so great. But he really is doing a great job at figuring out what is going on in the race and who's moving with purpose and who isn't. And he is painting that picture. And and I love John. John Embrial's a tremendous guy, and Frank paid tribute to him. Frank has really picked up that ball and running with it.
No, he's doing a great job. I'm just looking at the comments. We have a lot of thank you very much, everyone, for listening and watching. I know Frank enjoys talking, so we didn't get as many questions and comments from you guys in as possible, listening and watching. We really appreciate it. And Paul, two quick things. We'll end the show here. Number one, he mentioned that it's not difficult to call the races. Didn't they raise the turf course like a few years ago? Literally raised it up a little bit higher, so it's a little bit harder to see the dirt course on the far turn. Correct? Like the actual turf course was raised up, I believe, a little bit for drainage and other things, right?
That I believe you're right. And Howard and Larry has said this. The vantage point from that announcer's booth is not great.
Not good.
So it's
maybe I'll have a chance to go up there next week. What do you think? Maybe Frank we'll see what Frank can do for
right up on the roof. I know how to get there.
That'd be great. Love to get a picture with him. And last thing, of course, he's doing a great job there. And like you said, it is not easy at all to do what he does. I don't think people have understanding at all how difficult it is to call races, but Frank is he's much too humble. He's one of the best announcers in the world and does a great job. And Paul, I don't want to get sentimental, but that's one of the things that I'm very proud of this show. Sure, we can handicap and go through PPs all the time, but I just want to say what a pleasure it is to have you, someone, a professional journalist, next to me to interview so many great people we've interviewed on this podcast, and we'll continue to do so because this game is much more than just looking at the black and white numbers in the past performances.
And we've talked about this before, Howard. It's a testimony to this sport, this game, that someone like Frank Mirahmadi is willing to give us an hour in the middle of his work week. Tomorrow is Wednesday for him.
Yes.
With three huge days coming up, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And to Todd Pletcher to give us what he gave us that night, it was over
Chad
a half
Brown,
hour.
Yeah.
Chad Brown, and
unbelievable.
And it's a testament to the game and the people in it. And because I think deep down, the people that love it want it to succeed, and we're doing our very small part to make that happen.
We're trying. Again, we could not do without you, the fan zone. So please make sure you hit that subscribe button, the notification bell, the thumbs up button. Paul and I will be back on the air, about 3 hours from now? We'll be on tomorrow morning. We'll be on Friday morning, 10:30 Eastern for Saratoga today. Paul, thanks a lot for Frank Mirahmadi, my co-host, Paul Hallen, and for co-host Pete Visco. This has been your host, Howard Kravitz, episode 279 of the HHH Racing Podcast. Crush your bets at Del Mar this Saturday. Take care, everyone. Have a great night. Bye-bye.
Out. If you have not followed his Triple H horse racing podcast, you're missing out. It's one of the best podcasts in the country.